Our world is shaped by these magnificent, completely invisible forces. We're talking about currents deep in the ocean, the Earth's magnetic field, and microscopic ecosystems that thrive completely unseen all around us. Well, in this explainer, we're exploring one of the most absolutely fascinating biological forces on the planet. We're going to take a journey deep into biology, animal behavior, and honestly, the illusion of choice itself. Think about it like the old trade winds along a coastline. When you watch the trees bend, you're observing an effect, right? But the wind itself remains invisible. You really need to know its direction, its strength, and the landscape it's interacting with to truly understand it. And it's the exact same thing when we observe an organism acting strangely. We're just seeing the leaning trees. We have to look a lot deeper to actually find the wind. And that brings us to Toxoplasma gondii. Now, what if I told you a microscopic organism could literally tilt the very balance of a mind? Now, I know it's super easy to jump straight to Hollywood monsters and sci-fi tropes here, but the truth is far more awe-inspiring. This isn't magic. It's a breathtaking masterclass in evolutionary survival and incredibly precise biological mechanisms. Okay, first things first, we've got to totally dismantle that viral pop science myth of dramatic mind control. The parasite is not some evil genius trying to completely rewire a host's personality just to create general chaos. Not at all. Its singular biological goal is what we call a transmission advantage. It just wants to complete its life cycle, which classically runs through cats. So anything that increases the chance of an infected host getting to a feline predator, that's exactly what biology selects for. Let's dive into Section 1, the fisherman's net. Picture a fisherman throwing a net. The goal isn't to somehow reshape the entire ocean, right? The goal is simply to increase the chances that the net catches something when it really matters. Toxoplasma operates in the exact same way. It really doesn't need broad control over the host. It only needs to slightly alter the odds, maybe subtly shifting risk-related behaviors or how an animal avoids predators, just to improve its chances of transmission. But here's where we've got to be super careful as observers. Output is not mechanism. Imagine you're listening to a radio, and the sound suddenly gets distorted. You don't immediately assume the radio station was taken over by hackers, right? It could be a damaged antenna, a bad power supply, or just frayed wiring. Similarly, if a host behavior changes, the parasite might just be influencing immune activity, or neurochemistry, or tissue environments. It's rarely a direct lever being pulled inside the brain. Which brings us to Section 2, tilting the balance. Now, this really illustrates how the parasite actually works. It doesn't need to invent a brand new behavior from scratch. A host already has these incredibly complex systems for curiosity, caution, and exploration. Imagine a seesaw. The parasite simply acts as a shifted weight on that biological seesaw, just slightly nudging the existing decision-making machinery that weighs danger against exploration. In evolutionary terms, these tiny, subtle shifts matter immensely. Think of a shopping cart with just one weak wheel. You know the feeling. The cart still moves forward, but over a long distance, it drifts off course just enough to crash. A modest change in a host's behavior, like, say, a slightly reduced fear of a cat's odor, can have massive life-or-death consequences if it pushes that host across a dangerous threshold at the exact wrong moment. So where exactly is the parasite hacking into the system? Well, behavior is a chain reaction. First, detection, noticing a cue. Second, valuation, deciding if that cue actually feels threatening. Third, selection, choosing how to react. And finally, expression, the physical movement itself. A parasite can actually perturb this chain at any of those points. And by breaking it down like this, we stop looking at behavior as some single magic trick and start looking for the precise biological entry point. All right, let's look at Section 3, deciphering the evidence. To actually decode what the parasite is doing, we rely on this expert-level core model. Whenever you hear a wild claim about toxoplasma, you've got to ask 4 things. Does this actually help transmission? What is the actual mechanism being altered? What is the context, meaning when and in whom does this happen? And finally, what is the observed behavior? This right here is your ultimate tool for spotting the difference between a real mechanism and an overblown media story. Because listen, not all claims are created equal. The strongest, most defensible scientific claims are incredibly narrow. Things like altered cat-cue processing, which aligns perfectly with that transmission goal. On the flip side, those broad pop science claims about sweeping personality changes or massive psychiatric links, they are incredibly leaky.
They're so easy to overstate, and they're usually plagued by confounding variables, like socioeconomic factors or just the host's underlying health.
Let's speed things up a bit with Section 4, rapid-fire edge cases. First up, we've got the resilient host. You test a subject, they definitely have the infection, but their behavior is completely unchanged. So, is the science wrong? No, not necessarily. It just means our shopping cart's weak wheel isn't currently under load. The host might be highly resilient, the timing could be off, or the specific behavior being measured just isn't the one being nudged. Next is the sickness effect. Now, this one's a massive trap in observational studies. If a host's behavior changes, is it targeted parasite manipulation, or is the host just exhausted and inflamed from fighting off an infection? There is a profound difference between a generally unwell host just slowing down and an invisible force actively fine-tuning fear circuits in the brain. Then we've got strain differences. Think of this kind of like planting the exact same seed in completely different soils. The seed is identical, right? But what grows depends heavily on sunlight, water, and the ground conditions. A behavioral effect might only appear under highly specific host development stages or with very specific strains of the parasite. The environment absolutely shapes the final breathtaking result. And finally, we really have to recognize the gap between statistics and biology. A study might show an effect that is statistically significant on paper, but you have to ask yourself, is it biologically meaningful? Is the effect size actually large enough to influence transmission out there in the real wild across thousands of generations? Science isn't just about finding a math difference. It's about finding practical reality. Okay, let's zoom out for our final part. Section 5, the illusion of choice. To really navigate this incredible biology without getting lost in the hype, you need 3 vital filters for any study you read. Specificity. Is the claim narrow and precise? Mechanism. Does it actually connect to a real, testable biological pathway? And causality. Does the design of the study truly justify the dramatic conclusion? When these 3 line up, you are looking at magnificent, rigorous science. When they don't, well, you're probably just looking at a compelling story. Ultimately, the real expert move here is learning to assign the exact right amount of confidence to the right claim. You don't have to choose between blind belief in mind control or total skepticism. By understanding that behavior is simply the visible surface and mechanism is the hidden wind shaping the trees, you become beautifully calibrated to reality. Which leaves us with one final, kind of awe-inspiring thought. The next time you make a sudden choice or feel this weird pull toward risk or caution, take a second to marvel at the sheer, breathtaking complexity of nature. Ask yourself, is it purely you making the choice, or is there a shifted weight on your biological seesaw?